This week on the Inside Athletic Training Podcast, we're joined by two guests tackling one of the most urgent issues in youth baseball, arm health. Dave Yeager, longtime Milwaukee Brewers assistant athletic trainer, brings decades of big league experience to the conversation, and he's joined by Jeff Weems, the founder of PitchKount, a platform built to help monitor and manage pitch counts and reduce overuse injuries at the youth level. Together, they discuss the risk of early sports specialization, the data behind youth arm injuries, and what PitchKount set out to solve when traditional tracking methods weren't enough. Enjoy the show. Dave, Jeff, welcome to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. Dave, I think you're the first ever four-time guest on the show, so it's great to have you back as always. Jeff, look forward to chatting with you about PitchKount and your career as an athletic trainer as well. Guys, to get started, I want to give you a few minutes each to share with our listeners who may not be familiar with you guys a bit about your career and the world of athletic training and what you've done. So, Dave, many of our listeners have heard you on. You're with the Milwaukee Brewers, had an illustrious career there, former member of the PBATS board, a lot of stuff that we work on together, but want to let you share a bit of information about yourself with the listeners here.
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me back on, Sam. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Fourth timer, right? Like, I feel like, okay, like maybe one more, we get to the Saturday Night Live, like gold jacket or something.
That's right.
But I appreciate you having me back on. Just, quick background. I've spent, a number of years with the Milwaukee Brewers, 13 years as a major league assistant athletic trainer. 8 or 9 years in their minor league system, and now in the last few years in more of a special assistant, but now a kind of independent consulting role with them, and then doing some other consulting projects and stuff with other groups, for example, with Jeff so it's been really a unique, or the last couple of years have been unique, but the journey's been just a learning process, right? Like, and a continuous development process. And that's kind of fits my mentality, and, just have had a opportunity to do some things. And I like to do this podcast so I can share some of the things I've learned.
Right. Absolutely. And we've, as I've said, we've worked on a number of projects over the years, like the student symposium, internship. You're super involved in the PBATS educational side, which is always appreciated. Well, Jeff, how about yourself? I know you have a background in athletic training and professional sports, high school athletic training, coaching. You seemingly have your hands on a lot of different areas of baseball. What's your background, and how'd you get into athletic training?
Yeah, so thank you for having me, Sam. This is really an honor to be here. So how I got into athletic training, I really can't tell you how and why I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I was a high school baseball player. I graduated, back in the early 1700s, it feels like. But it was definitely before there were athletic trainers at the high school level, and played a year in college. But somehow I just knew that, there was always somebody that ran onto the field, in the NFL and Major League Baseball, and that took care of the athletes. And somehow I just kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I went to the university. I went to Livingston University, that's now the University of West Alabama, with R.T. Floyd was where I did my undergraduate work. And then I got into professional baseball. This was kind of at the beginning of the internet age. I actually had to write a letter to the major league offices in New York to get addresses to all 28 teams at the time, and send out hard copy letters to every team asking for just an internship. And this was well before PBATS was doing the summer internships. But I was fortunate enough, my high school baseball coach was Dan Jennings, who's now assistant GM with the Texas Rangers. Many of you may know DJ as the GM of the Marlins, who came down and managed for half of a season. But I think his proudest moment in Major League Baseball was that he never had to write my name in the lineup like he had to in high school. But DJ at the time was working with the Mariners, and so he got me hooked up to go spend a week or two with Paul Harker when he was down in Jacksonville. Right. And I slept on Desi Relaford's couch during that time. But I got to meet Edgar Martinez. I still have an Edgar Martinez signed base bat in my office at home. But so that was kind of, and then from those letters, got all the rejection letters of saying we don't do internships, blah, blah, blah. And out of the blue, Scott Lawrenson, who was the minor league coordinator for the Mets, called me and was like, hey, we got a job. And I was right about to graduate. So that's how I got into baseball with the New York Mets and spent 5 years with those, in that organization. Very grateful for that time there. And was in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and Columbia, South Carolina, and 2 years in Binghamton, and got to work a couple of big league camps. And then from there, I've been at the high school level. I've done some college athletic training and a lot of other jobs, and scratched a bunch of itches. But this is who I am and what I do.
Right. That's awesome. And Jeff, the main area of our topics today, we're going to get into PitchKount, the company you founded, talk a lot about youth arm health and sports specialization, and Dave's impact on what you guys are doing there as well. To get started, talk about the founding of PitchKount. Was there a moment during your career treating athletes or just maybe observing or coaching when you decided, hey, this industry and sport needs this tool, and why that is?
Yeah, no, there was absolutely a particular moment. And that moment came in, I believe it was 2016, when the National Federation of High Schools, which is, like the NCAA for high schools, the NFHS, the baseball committee, passed a rule that every association had to move away from innings limits, and they now had to use pitch count regulations. And I'm a rules guy, so, if you tell me that I don't get my $200 till you pass go, well, you don't get it when you land on go. You get it when you pass go. And so, when that came out, the first thing I started doing was just trying to figure out how is this thing going to work. And one of my good friends is the baseball coach where I work now at the high school, and I wasn't working there at the time, but I went by. I knew he was on the baseball committee in Georgia, and so I asked him. I said, Paul, how in the world are they going to police this thing? Because this guy can pitch today and this guy can't, and all the different things. And so he's like, Jeff, I got no idea. So I just started looking around on the internet to see if there was something that I could take to him to take to the state of Georgia, because I knew there was going to be a lot of moving parts, and this was all brand new. So there was nothing. And I've got enough entrepreneurialism in me from my dad that I said, well, it's going to take a system, and somebody's going to build it, and it might as well be. So I took out a second mortgage on my home, got with a software company in Valdosta, Georgia, and we built the original system. And we're now in the second version of that, and it's a lot more robust than what we originally had. But that's what drove me to initially build the system, was to help high school athletic associations and high school coaches manage the rules so they followed the rules in order to protect the athletes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And Dave, on your end, you have so much experience in Major League Baseball, the most elite athletes in the world. What excited you about getting involved with PitchKount? Talk about, getting to know Jeff and getting more involved. And why is it so important for someone with a big-time sports medicine athletic training background in pro sports to kind of be involved in the PitchKount process?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, Sam. Like, one of my passions over the last, decade plus has been the workload concept and the workload management idea. And so this, number one, Jeff and some of his colleagues, like he and I have connections from way back, right? And so we already kind of knew each other, being from Alabama and kind of knowing a lot of the same people. But the PitchKount philosophy, the program, and Jeff's interest in looking at this stuff, it just fits into that workload management concept that I've been kind of working on and been a part of developing over the last a number of years. So it was kind of a natural fit for me to kind of get involved and help out.
Mm-hmm. And Jeff, on your end, start from the kind of ground up, the most basic aspect. We know what the goal you set out to accomplish was. Talk about the platform. Who's using it? How does it work? How does it solve that problem of workload like Dave was talking about?
Yeah. So really, you have to kind of think about the PitchKount platform in different silos, if you will.
Okay.
So obviously, the foundation of the system and the company was to fill that need for state athletic associations and high school coaches. But that also has direct application to leagues. We work with a number of collegiate summer leagues. We work with some youth leagues as well. So really anybody who, and that can even translate over to, the big thing now is travel organizations are now becoming nationwide, right?
Yep.
It's not just a little team here and a little team there. There's certainly that, but there's giant organizations now. And so this has application even at that level that they could say, hey, here's a system that we're going to implement throughout our whole organization. And so it has that application there. The other component, and really this is kind of the new piece and the evolution of what we're doing. And really, we're very fortunate to have, Dave kind of coming alongside and partnering with us in this, is that we've developed an individual user model, which we call PK Plus. And whereas the regular PK system, I say regular, is geared towards teams and associations and coaches, PK Plus is for the individual user, whether that be the athlete themselves or really at the youth level, mom and dad. And, one of the biggest things that we know, and this has been, research has shown this, is that, while people know that there are pitch count regulations or guidelines, they may not necessarily know the name Pitch Smart. They certainly don't know in mass, right? That painting with a broad brush, the masses don't know what they say, what those regulations are or guidelines are. And really the biggest thing, and this is one of the a key component of what I want to get done with PK Plus, is when you look at the Pitch Smart guidelines, it's really a three-legged stool. There's the in-game pitch counts that then equate to X number of days rest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has tried to boil down the Pitch Smart guidelines to just that. Well, that's only one leg of the stool. The other two are dealing with the chronic workload, and that's the two pieces that's actually grounded in science. That's what Dr. Fleissig and Dr. Andrews through ASMI in that 10-year research study showed that when pitchers threw more than 8 consecutive months, their arm injury rate skyrocketed. When they had more than 100 innings in a rolling 12-month period, their arm injury skyrocketed. Those are the two things that nobody talks about at all. And so what our goal is with PK Plus is to bring the simplicity of a technology to mom and dad, so that they now have in their hand, all they got to do is say, little Johnny threw on this date, he threw this many pitches, and then it tells them based on the Pitch Smart guidelines for their age band, this is how many days rest you should have. Mm-hmm. And they can utilize that across all the teams that little Johnny plays on, whether it's his rec league team, his travel team, if he goes and he has a private pitching coach, but he does live bullpens, they can map all of that out, and we can really start to use it, as a more robust workload management tool than just simply I threw in a game and threw X number of pitches.
Yeah, that's a great explanation, and I love the shared data aspect of it. I mean, I think that's so crucial, as you mentioned, with every kid seemingly playing on a travel team, playing for this school, playing for that group. It's kind of muddied the waters a lot. And you made a great point about the rolling 12-month period. And Dave, I'm curious about your thoughts on this, with your background and expertise and workload. It's not just in-season tracking. The off-season you guys mentioned is hugely important. Has anything like that existed before? And also, Dave, in your opinion, why is it so important to track off-season workload, even if it's not at full strength? I know there's many pitching labs that pop up. I grew up in Wisconsin. I didn't touch a baseball in the winter, but now that's changed for kids up there. And you're seeing a lot more arm issues in the Midwest where you didn't used to. Jamie Reed showed a cool chart on the podcast last year about kind of that arm injury based on location, which has changed a lot. But Dave, curious in your thoughts about that off-season workload monitoring, why that's so important.
Yeah, there's a couple points. Well, number one, like one of the main principles of workload management is you have to know what they're doing, right? You have to know what actually their load is. And so a platform like PitchKount PK Plus kind of fills that bucket and with that type of information. The other thing is, there was a study that came out, it's probably been 4 years ago now, but it talked about this almost like the three-legged stool that Jeff talked about in terms of everyone wants to focus on the game pitch counts, like the game counts, right? Well, this paper, and I forget the author off the top of my head, but the paper touted the importance of understanding the quote hidden pitches that take place in between those outings, right? So the bullpen sessions, the warm-up sessions, the as Jeff mentioned, the pitching coach sessions and things like that, and those add up, right? And those matter, because if you're just focusing on the game, then you miss that whole big context piece of all the things that happens. Ironically, that same study was done, or the same type of study was done with professional pitchers, and the hidden pitches weren't quite as important because the professional pitchers are more regimented and it's regular routines, right? And so they track together. But with the youth pitchers, that's not the case, right? And so it's important to do that. The other thing about why these off-season tracking matters is because we're talking about tissues, right? We're talking about biological tissues and tissue tolerance, and so understanding, again, to go back and look at some studies at the professional level where increased joint laxity at the elbow by the end of the season, but then it kind of normalizes by the time the spring training ran around again, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the time off and the decreased pitching loads and so forth. But if you don't have that and you're pitching all the time and not understanding what you're doing, then you just continue to have this laxity that continues to grow, right? And so it's important to understand, number one, what they're doing, number two, how often they're doing it, and number three, like, what's the ramp up rates for these things? Because that matters too.
Yeah, and Dave, to follow up on that, one thing I've found super interesting in talking with Dr. Freehill and Dr. Fleissig and a number of different people in the space about is, those dead periods that are now mandated, or taking time off. Some people argue, I've heard, it's better to be throwing all year. Some people argue it's better to have a dead period where you're not. When it comes to young kids who are not going to be as regimented as people, athletes you're working with, Dave, how do you manage that? Is it case by case? Is it person dependent? You want people taking breaks? Do you want people staying in shape arm wise? Like, how do you kind of navigate that as a sports medicine professional?
Yeah, I mean, well, at the professional level, it's case by case, individualized, right?
Hmm.
But we tend to, um, just decrease the load, but keep them going, right? Like,
Okay.
but at the youth level, uh, it depends on their stage of development and what
Right.
their goal is, right? Like, there's no reason for a 9, 10, 11 year old to be playing more games a year and throwing more than the guys that are pitching on television right now, right? And as you get more developed, and you think about the body and how it matures, and when you get into the high school ages, and you have players that are, okay, this guy's going to go play, at the next level, right? Like, you start taking that more on a case by case, individual
Hmm.
basis. But if we're just looking at youth players in the aggregate, like, they absolutely need that time off to focus on other things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of people want to take what you're doing with the Milwaukee Brewers or PBATS members are doing with their clubs and just say that's what my kids should be doing. And that's obviously a little different. And they
Yeah.
don't have the care, they don't have the recovery, they don't have the resources of, working with people like you. So it's important to remember that.
you know
Uh,
one of the things I emphasize to that point, right, like, is and I think it gets lost on people. But when I have conversations with parents about that, because they want to fit their 14-year-old into the major league model, and my response is, you know what, this is their job. Like, at the
right.
major league level, like, this is their job, this is what they get paid to do. So in some instances, some of the guidelines get kind of pushed around a little
Hmm.
bit. There's a lot more gray area, because this is their livelihood, right? And that's not the case for a 14-year-old.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that is good to remind parents and coaches out there that exactly that. This is supposed to be fun, youth baseball and high school baseball, even college, everything, even professional baseball. But it is different when there's money on the table. Well, Jeff,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
no, but Sam, I was just going to say, kind of on this topic. So, one of the things I've been very fortunate enough to do was I coached, probably like a lot of dads, I coached my son's travel team
Hmm.
from 10U to 14U. And one of the reasons why I coached it was I wanted to control the schedule, number one.
Right.
Number two, I knew enough about baseball that I could get my guys prepared to go try out for their high school team, probably make
Hmm.
it and give them a chance to compete, to get on the field.
Yep.
But what I'd like to kind of add to this is I didn't follow the Pitch Smart guidelines to a T, but I ended up doing the Pitch Smart guidelines. So just to quickly give you kind of what our schedule was
Yeah.
we would, mid-January, and this is in Georgia where we have good weather. Mid-January, we would start to practice 2 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, full team practice. We would start playing games the first part of March. So we had, about a 6-week ramp up time. And we would play only 2 tournaments a month. And I tried to always go a week on, a week off. And then we were done by July 4th. And I told my parents and my kids, y'all go be a family. Get away from baseball. And again, this was from 9 to 14U. And that's, now you're into high school and it changes. And then we would pick back up in September, or September, 2 days a week, and just play a couple of little tournaments for those who weren't playing a fall sport. If you were playing a fall sport, you go do that, right? We're not going to double dip on that.
Hmm.
And then when we got to after at Halloween, we shut it down again. And so the whole month of November and December, I put my kids into 2 groups, and they would come one day a week, and we would hit one week, and we would, throw and work on pitching mechanics the next week. So they only picked up a baseball with me twice a month, 2 days in November and 2 days in December.
Got it.
From 9 to 14, I had 0 arm injuries.
Yeah.
Nobody ever went to the doctor. Nobody ever missed a game. Nobody ever had to go to physical therapy. So the Pitch Smart guidelines work when you kind of follow the whole program. And that's been my experience. And I just kind of bring that forward as a case study, if you will, in the real world.
No, that makes total sense. And that's kind of the direction I want to take this conversation here is you were accountable, you complied. A lot of parents might not. There's going to be a lot of parents who, well, my son is a good player. There's decent velocity. We need to grind it out, keep going, keep going. They may comply with PitchKount or Pitch Smart recommendations during their in-season games, but compliance is going to be one of the biggest challenges in the offseason. I think you guys, I'm sure you've thought about that a lot. How do you approach with PitchKount the accountability piece? You do a great job of connecting the ecosystems of high school or athletic director or parents. You do a great job with that, but ultimately it falls upon those people to care about the individual and the young player. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, at the high school level, it's really the accountability is really all about at the coach level, right?
Yep.
Because not only, obviously, the pitch count rules are in place to try to protect athletes, right? Because of the nature of how they work, it's also a competitive balance issue now. If somebody's not following the guidelines or they're cheating for, which I've seen in the 10 years I've been doing this, amazingly, coaches will shave pitches so their guy comes back a day early or they'll, things happen. So it's crucially important that there be a validation process and there be accountability from an athletic scoreboard standpoint, right? When you get over to the youth side, it's, that component is not there. Obviously, teams are going to try to win these tournaments, but, it's really more about educating mom and dad and getting them to buy into what's in the best interest of their child. Kind of the last thing I would say about, the guys who played for me, all of the ones who pitched, which was almost the whole team, they all pitched in high school. Nobody had arm injuries. The ones that, could advance, did advance. And so, I don't want somebody to think, well, if I follow that schedule, that's great for somebody who's not going to go play in college. No, I think we had 4 or 5 kids go pitch in college. And I'm not taking any credit for that. I'm just saying that I got them to high school with their arms still attached and gave them a chance.
Right.
And I'm seeing that now as a high school athletic trainer that even in my own program where our middle school kids are getting to middle school in the 6th grade, having had multiple shutdowns from Little League elbow or, needing a labrum surgery by the time they get to us in high school. And, it all comes back to educating, in my opinion, educating the parents and getting them to buy into what's the best thing to do.
Right.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add there is, Jeff did a really good job of talking about like the high school model, right? But the high school coaches having the responsibility in some instance here. But the high school season's only 30, 40 games, right? And then they go off and they play on however many travel ball teams during the summer and so forth. And so whether that's with their high school coach or not, right? And so the parents they need some transparency here, right? They need some responsibility here too. And the PK Plus platform it's a really unique educational opportunity here to provide some transparency for, hey, like this is what your child is actually doing, right? and getting them some awareness so that they can take some responsibility and the compliance piece with the various coaches that they're working with.
Yeah, I think it's hugely important for all the adults involved in this to be transparent and compliant. Like if you care about the kids, you should do it. It makes sense. But I know people's minds can get a little blurred when there's a future on the line and things like that. Well, Jeff, looking at what you do now, we have a lot of young athletic trainers in our audience, listeners of the show. Might be someone working at a high school, someone who's an intern for the Brewers for their first year, or in a college setting, or even younger for that matter. How does it go in terms of the athletic trainers getting involved with PitchKount? Is this a tool they can actively use in their day-to-day? Is this something they should be making a case to their athletic director for? What's kind of that process of involving the medical professionals and athletic trainers in PitchKount?
Yeah, no, that's really a great question, Sam. And honestly, you're tracking right along with what I envision. This isn't in place yet, but I see the application and we're going in this direction. But with PK Plus, I envision a way to be able to really even go to orthopedists.
Okay.
Say, listen, you're getting all these kids, I say all these kids, but you're getting kids coming into your clinic who have little leaguer's elbow or, whatever it is, labrum issues, rotator cuff issues. And now you have a tool that you can hand them and say, hey, you should really, I've even had the idea of coming up with script pads, right? Of PK Plus, and they hand it to them and say, you go get this or you'll stay out of my daggone office. And, but I certainly see the application on the medical side that medical professionals, whether that be physicians or physical therapists or athletic trainers, certainly that can, try to increase its usage so that we just put the information in the hands of the people who are making the decisions, right?
Right.
Everybody always puts the ultimate blame or responsibility at the foot of the parents. They'll say, oh, it's that parent's fault that they let their kid throw 100 pitches. Well, what parent's going to walk to the fence during the game and say, hey, coach, get my kid off the mound? That's not going to fly. But if they have a tool like PK Plus and they can have a conversation before the season or, and set some expectations, and now, we start to have a different dialogue, then we can hopefully affect some change. Kind of the other piece that we're doing is, what happens in PK Plus with the high school player transition automatically goes back and informs his high school coach during the summer. So it gives him an easy way without him doing any work to kind of stay connected to his players, because that's truly the way I look at it. Those high school players can only play at a certain school because of whatever those rules are, right? Whether it's where they live or whatnot, unless you're in Florida where it's open enrollment and you switch schools all the time. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying that's what they have. But by and large, high school players can only play at a particular school. Well, they're coming back to that high school coach, and they're all trying to build a program, and they need their players coming back healthy. And so my hope and goal is that we're helping the high school coach kind of get back in the middle of this process so that he has a way to keep track of his players and hopefully affect some change on their usage pattern in the off season. One of the latest studies, and I'm sure you've seen this or maybe even talked about it, was, Dr. Erickson out of Utah in 24 published that study of the pitch smart guidelines with high school pitchers and the violation rate. And they found that the violation rate was 14% during the high school season, but it was 86% out of the high school season.
Right.
And that tracks with all of the other research that shows, in travel baseball or even in youth baseball, that, guidelines are not really followed very closely. So my goal is to, again, inform everybody who needs to be informed so that we can try to make better decisions for the person that we're actually trying to help, which is the athlete.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's super valuable information there as it relates to coaches, parents, and athletic trainers specifically. Dave, in your opinion, you're the chairman of the PBATS internship committee, someone who has mentored a lot of athletic trainers within PBATS and outside in the college setting, answering a ton of questions that come in for us about the profession and what people can do to improve. Do you think there's some sort of missing education in terms of athletic trainers around workload management for the pitcher at the amateur level or even at the professional level as well?
Well, I think it's hard to get everything into the education model, right? Number one, especially when you have um, condensed stuff now to the master's level program. So all the things that athletic trainers and their educational program need to know, like it's done in a 2 year, 1.5 year kind of model. And so it's hard to get a lot of everything in there, that may be beyond the basic entry level knowledge, right?
Right.
But from a workload perspective, I think what I have seen with young athletic trainers, students, new clinicians, like I think they just they don't have as good of a grasp on exercise dosing, right? And throwing is exercise, right? Let's don't mistake that, right? And so
Right.
the same principles, whether you're talking about strength and conditioning and progressive overload and specificity and so forth, like those same principles apply for what we're talking about here. And so I think like one of the things that gets overlooked is that this idea of how to dose exercise and progress it appropriately, which tracks with this same conversation that we're having. And so this is one of the reasons why like I like students and new grads and or that have like exercise science backgrounds along with just with their athletic training backgrounds, who also have strength and conditioning experiences and sometimes certifications that go with their athletic training education background, because you learn some of those foundational concepts of exercise dosing and prescription and so forth. And while you may have had it in your undergrad, like sometimes we forget it, that they're connected, right? When we get to the higher, or get out of school and get into our practice. But I think that's a concept. Those concepts are the ones that we could get better at once we get in the field is exercise dosing, prescription, progressions, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And Dave, to piggyback off that, and kind of shift a little bit toward just the epidemic of youth arm health that we've been talking about here. You've had a seat for decades watching pitchers come through professional systems, specifically with the Brewers. Is there a certain point in a young pitcher's development when you see them, or early on in a career in college or in the minor leagues, when you might start seeing consequences of what they did to their arms or their coaches did to their arms years prior? Are there any patterns that you see?
Well, I think I think you kind of see these effects immediately,
Okay.
right? Like, the especially when they come into the professional realm, right? Like the strongest predictor of injury, regardless of what injury we're talking about, but one of the strongest predictors of injury we have is previous history of injury, right? And so if you have a youth player that's already, or a high school player that's already had Tommy John, well, two things you get there. Like, number one, their overall skill development has been affected for a long window of time, right? And so they've missed some windows of opportunity that they would have had from a development standpoint once they get to the next levels, and also like that also puts them at risk for future injury, and so we see it's a risk versus reward healthcare model in some cases, and guys who have missed opportunities because they have lower durability because they've not played, right?
Yeah.
And guys that have had injury histories already, like their risks increase, and so that as they enter the day-to-day environment of the professional world, like it's a big difference.
Yeah. And Jeff, on your end, in the high school setting, when a lot of these issues are taking place and growing, how do you kind of explain that risk to parents that might be interested in learning more, or parents who you see maybe are pushing too hard in travel baseball? Because we've talked a lot about the parent within this youth arm health epidemic. You, as the athletic trainer there at the high school setting, how do you talk to them? What do you do to educate? Are you noticing a lot of parents coming to you asking how they can stay healthy or avoid these issues? What's the kind of sentiment right now at that setting?
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of the first thing that I always try to get across, um, and um, and this even goes back to when I was running my team and with my parents, was that we are dealing with adolescents who are not professional athletes. Number one.
Right.
Number two, the human body is the human body. Those professional athletes, once they get into their 20s, for sure, their growth plates are closed. They are who they are. Prior to that, we're dealing with adolescents who have open growth plates, who are still growing. They're everything's in development, whether it's motor control, ligaments, tendons, bones, all that stuff. And so back to the kind of the point you were making earlier, or the question that you asked about, everybody wants to take what's done at the professional level and say, that's what I need to do with my 10-year-old. No, it's not. Not at all. So that's kind of number one. That's what I try to get them to, at least comprehend, or not comprehend, but just buy into that fact. And then from there, it's really, and look, I've been in the belly of the beast. It is a real thing to get caught up in that we've got to do more. If we don't do X, Y, and Z, my kid's going to fall behind. And it's like this keep up with the Joneses out of fear,
right,
that something's not going to happen. And the reality is that is not true. The good athletes find their way to the top, and I mean, I think they're, the push from a lot of different sports, but particularly from baseball, and, here recently for sure, about multi-sport athletes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at all these guys that played football, they played baseball, or they played basketball, and they were athletes, and
Right.
Certainly there's ones who make it that specialize, but that's not the only way. And for most people, that's not the way anyway. And it's trying to just get them to get comfortable with that their kid's not going to fall behind if they just don't go chase everything. But unfortunately now we live in this, I say unfortunately, but also fortunately, right? All of our knowledge and education has accelerated tremendously because of technology, right? We can all go to YouTube and learn how to, take for example, I had to switch out the headlight on my Ford F-150. All right, my dad was a mechanic. I know how to change a headlight. It takes about 3 minutes. Well, I had to go to YouTube and watch a video, because now it takes almost an hour to take off all this stuff on your car to work your way down to get this one little light that should take now it's unbelievable. But my point is, I went to YouTube and learned how to do that. Well, I think, now everybody can do that with sports, and particularly now with throwing, and everybody's trying to sell the next thing of how we can make you throw harder and this, that, and the other. And, it's this echo chamber, and, I don't know. I feel like I'm the guy out here, and probably Dave as well, or all of us are probably out here trying to say, y'all, just take a chill pill. It's going to be okay. But people are like, no, we got to go, and they just don't want to hear it. It seems to me. So
no, that's a great point, and you kind of led me right to my next question for Dave, about the sports specialization, multi-sport athletes. Dave, again, I mentioned this a handful of times. You work with the best athletes in the world. Now they're playing baseball for a living. I think the specialization conversation becomes bigger, and it expands outside of pitching. Dave, do you see the kind of the downstream consequences of single sport athletes when they get to you? Is that something you guys can notice, something you track when it comes to the draft? Like, how in depth do you guys actually go with, without giving away any trade secrets, of course? Like when you talk to athletes or work with them, what are the conversations like about sports specialization? Did they do that? Should they do that? Kind of when they get to the professional ranks.
Yeah, I mean you're right. Like this early specialization topic is a huge one, and um, you know I have conversation with athletes that I work with on this kind of stuff, right? And
Hmm.
and you also just kind of look at the research and things like that, especially from other sports, right? But and the literature is pretty clear right now that like the athletes at the higher tiers tended to explore other sports, play other things, and as they were developing until they kind of got to a certain age, and then kind of specialized in their aspects. I would be curious though, like because as we sit here and we talk about it, and some of them, Jeff's right. Like parents have this mind. I'd be curious if we repeated those studies, from 10 years ago, and we repeated them again in 5 or 10 years. I would imagine just because of the sample that you're collecting, like you would see that specialization became a bigger, like the multi-sport thing may have been less because the groups that survived into professional baseball maybe were early specialization athletes. So but I do think like clinically, like what you tend to see and what we tend to look for is you will see a couple things. Number one, you'll just see more robust athleticism, right?
Hmm.
You'll see some different types of athletes. I mean, baseball is a late development sport. You can see this when you just look at youth pitchers, and you look at high school pitchers, and you look at college and pro pitchers, and the fluidity of their movements, and the just the overall the degrees of freedom begin to kind of open up, and their movements become more fluid and graceful, right, as they pitch. This is not by default, right? Like it is their developmental system allowing this, right? And this their athleticism being expressed through this, and so so it's a sport unlike say gymnastics, where it is like a youth specialization
Yeah.
type sport, right? But what you tend to lose with that early specialization is in a sport like baseball is that foundational athleticism, and this athleticism can be beneficial for building robust, resilient athletes, right? And it goes back to talking about their capacities and load and tolerance, and so when in general, when you have more physical capacity and athleticism, you can tolerate more loads, right?
Right.
And but we miss that. I also I go back to a conversation I used to have with well, he's the bullpen coach in Milwaukee now, but he used to be the catching roving coordinator in the minor leagues when I was in the minor leagues, and we used to have this conversation all the time about he would come in and ask me about players. And oftentimes, one of the first questions I wanted to know when I first got players in the minor leagues was, "Hey, did you play high school football?" Right? And because I wanted to know how, from a psychological perspective, how resilient you were. Right? If you get knocked down, can you get back up? Right? Like if you have a bad day, are you going to shake it off and get right back to it, or is it going to ruin our next week? Right? And so those things kind of matter too.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I always love hearing stories about kind of that real world application of playing a lot of sports. Well, guys, this has been awesome. We could talk about this topic for hours and hours. Unfortunately, I don't want to take too much of your time. But to wrap up today, we'll start with you, Jeff. If there's one thing you could change or one piece of advice you could give, whether that's like a policy like PitchSmart, a tool like PitchKount, culture, coaching practice, parent mindset, to better treat youth arms, what would that be?
Yeah, so I really think if we could change the mindset of what are we really trying to accomplish, right? Through youth athletics, we're all, those parents want their child to play high school athletics, right? So let's do what it takes at the youth level to prepare them for the high school level. And let's let college and pro, that's like icing on the cake. But I mean, because we all know the statistics, right? I think it's less than 8% of high school athletes go on to play college. And, those that get paid to play sports is minuscule.
Yeah.
And but kind of the other part to that is, because I remember having this conversation with my son a lot, was, listen, we're doing the things today so that I'm trying to prepare you to play in high school, but I want you to be in the moment. You play on this team. You enjoy playing now with your buddies on this team. All that's going to take care of itself. I'm the one thinking about that. You just play and have fun. And so I think if we could change kind of that mindset of always looking ahead, and I'm trying to get a scholarship, and and now the whole NIL thing is a whole nother,
right.
So which is probably going to exacerbate that whole problem. But that's probably, to me, the biggest thing, I think. And then obviously, either using the guidelines, and certainly, using PitchKount to follow the guidelines would be the ideal thing to do.
Right.
And PK plus, but just pay attention. Really, is kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, and Dave, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's along the same lines as Jeff, maybe from a different perspective. But having been in the professional realm for as long as I have, like, no one cares. I think maybe no one is going to care if you won your U10, U11 travel championship, right? Like from that perspective, like, and if you do, as Jeff mentioned, the percentage of people that play the game that end up getting to be paid to play the game eventually is very small. And if you do get to play pro ball, like, the primary emphasis in the minor leagues is going to be on development, right? Yeah. Both physical development and skill development. And as I kind of talked about earlier, like, if you're a better athlete when you get here, the quicker we can move to the skill stuff, right? Otherwise, we still have to spend some time raising the floor here, and that affects your windows of development as well. So that, I think, that same kind of that coaching parent mindset of like, hey, like, it's at the youth levels, it's about physical development over skill development, over playing time, right? And then the rest of it kind of falls into place.
Yeah. No, all good points. And I think you guys are two experts in the field. And, if we could reach more parents, coaches, athletic trainers with this message, that would be awesome. But guys, we appreciate your time, all you're doing with PitchKount to educate parents, coaches, and athletic trainers. We'll share a link to the PitchKount website in the show notes for anyone that wants to learn more about it. But again, we appreciate your time. So thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Yep. Thank you, Sam. Enjoyed it.